Welcome back. This documentation is expository, so it is meant to help people to understand the deception that happened throughout history. That's what this whole documentary is about. This is just about Sha'ul. In order to understand Sha'ul, you have to understand his background. You have to understand the way he thought. You have to understand the training that was involved. You have to understand everything that there was about the man Sha'ul. This is an in-depth historical analysis using his own written text and using texts that were written about him, and also citing secular historical records to find out who he really is and what history says about him. Now, this video is going to cover a few sections, 8.3.3 all the way to 8.3.5. So we're just going to jump right into it. Sha'ul was a Pharisee, born of Pharisees. Sha'ul's history cannot be understood without recognizing that he was a Pharisee born from Pharisees. This and the following two sections breaks the ice. Philippians 3:5. Circumcised the 8th day of the race of Yasharal of the tribe of Benjamin, a Yahudy of Yahudim, according to Torah, a Pharisee. In Masa, or Acts 23:6. Now Sha'ul, perceiving that one part of the Sadducees and the other Pharisees, cried out in the council, Men, brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of Pharisees. I am being judged concerning the expectation and the resurrection of the dead. These verses cite that he was a Pharisee, and it can be said that even after his conversion, he called himself a Pharisee still. These two separated events speaks for itself. Sha'ul was a student of Rabban Gamaliel. Sha'ul's rigorous Pharisaic scribal training cannot be understood without recognizing his trainer, his history, and the practice behind the schools that he was taught in. This section is a prelude to the following sections. In Masa 22:3, Sha'ul states, I am indeed Yahudi, having been born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, having been instructed according to the exactness of the Torah of our fathers. Sha'ul knew Torah. Sha'ul knew the Nabiim, which is the prophets. Sha'ul knew the Katubim, which are the writings. Sha'ul knew the Septuagint. It was the scribes who wrote it. Sha'ul was also a scribe. Sha'ul knew Hadabar, the word of Yahuwah, very, very well. He was trained in both written and oral Torah, as well as had much rhetorical tools and philosophical training. Sha'ul was Gamaliel's most famous student. Who was Gamaliel? Gamaliel was one of the leading authorities within the Sanhedrin. He was renowned for knowledge of Torah and for his wisdom, among other things. Gamaliel was also known as Rabban Gamaliel the Elder, and he held these titles. Nazi, which means patriarch or president. Gamaliel was the head of the Sanhedrin. Gamaliel was the son of Simeon ben Hillel, who was the son of Hillel the Elder, aka Hillel the Babylonian. Who is Hillel the Babylonian? He was a sage and a scholar born in Babylonia in the Parthian Empire around 110 BCE, where a large, stable, and highly educated Yahudy community had existed since the Babylonian exile. He was a migrant from Babylon to Jerusalem, so he was a diaspora Yahudi, arriving around 70 BCE to study under Shammai and Avtalion. Hillel the Elder, the Babylonian, held the position of Nazi, prince, patriarch, president of the Sanhedrin. Again, this was the supreme Yahudi court. Hillel lived in Jerusalem during the time of King Herod and the Roman Emperor Augustus. His teachings and rulings are associated with the Yahudi Mishnah, which is the oral Torah. His teachings and rulings are also associated with the Yahudi Talmud, a Pharisaic authoritative collection of the Torah, prophets, and writings, but with Pharisaic additions, an example, traditions, and punishments. The Mishnah and Talmud differ from original Torah of Yahuwah and is considered nearly equal to the Torah of Yahuwah. Hillel the Babylonian is also associated with the House of Hillel, which are schools of thought, debate trainings on theology, ritual practice, and ethics. These are all critical to the oral Torah, all a part of the elite, rigorous training that Sha'ul had received from his teacher Gamaliel growing up at his feet. Again, Gamaliel is the grandson of Hillel the Babylonian. Key info: following his rise, Hillel the Babylonian established a leadership dynasty for 15 consecutive generations spanning over 400 years. His direct descendants, including Rabban Gamaliel, served as the spiritual and political heads of the Yahudi people in the land of Yasharal. The dynasty ended in the 5th century CE. This means the entire dynasty is rooted in Babylonian Yahudi culture, not Yahudi priestly aristocracy. This is due to their authority being based on religious scholarship and community respect rather than hereditary hereditary privilege or political power like that of the Sadducees. Their influence stemmed from their teachings and contributions to Yahudi law, which distinguished them from traditional ruling classes, like the Sadducees in the tribe of Levi. Think of the Pharisees as the scribes, the intellects, the ones who translated the text we read today into Greek. They are Hellenized Yahudim. Babylon at this time was a major center of Yahudi scholarship, home to ancient Yahudi communities dating back to the exile, a region deeply shaped by Mesopotamian, legal, astronomical, and scribal traditions. Hillel's intellectual formation was diaspora Babylonian, not Jerusalem temple-centric, because he was a Pharisee, not a Sadducee. Hillel lived under Herod and Augustus. Hillel's leadership period was from 30 BCE to 10 CE, which overlaps with Herod the Great, a Roman client king, you know all about him if you know the text, and also Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Hillel lived in Jerusalem during this period and interacted with a Sanhedrin increasingly shaped by Roman oversight. The Nazi or Patriarch was a Roman recognized office. By the time of Hillel's descendants, especially Gamaliel I, the office of Nazi was recognized by Roman authorities. Hint, hint, citizenship, allowed to function as a semi-autonomous Yahudi leadership position. And the Nazi Patriarch position was involved in diplomacy with Roman governors. Gamaliel, the elder's political authority. Massa 5 portrays Gamaliel I as a Pharisee, a leading authority in the Sanhedrin, and someone whose counsel influenced decision under Roman-appointed Sadducean high priests. This shows political influence. The Hillel dynasty had political legitimacy under Rome. This is highly important. Pay attention here. Again, Gamaliel is the Babylonians' grandson. Gamaliel inherited ownership of the schools and was highly respected due to his grandfather establishing everything that the Pharisees use, believe, teach, practice, and enforce. As clearly presented, the Pharisees, who emerged from a scribal class in Yehuda, were influenced by Babylonian scribal traditions, particularly during the Babylonian exile, which shaped their religious practices, culture, and texts. Pay attention here. As they encountered Hellenistic culture post-exile, they adapted Greek philosophical ideology while maintaining their core beliefs, leading to a syncretism of Babylonian and Greek wisdom in their teachings and interpretations of the Torah. This is highly important. While the primary focus of rabbinic schools were always the Abri or Hebrew text and oral legal traditions, Gamaliel's lineage, the House of Hillel, utilized advanced logical and rhetorical tools from Babylon. They adapted Greek dialectic methods to develop their own rules of scriptural interpretation known as Middot, M-I-D-D-O-T. Look it up. Furthermore, Gamaliel's students were trained in formal public discourse and debate, skills necessary for elite Yahudi figures who had to plead their cases before Roman authorities and the Sanhedrin. For clarity, the clearest historical evidence of this specific educational background comes from Gamaliel's most famous student, Sha'ul of Tarsus. Sha'ul's subsequent letters and speeches show that his rabbinic education went hand in hand with Greek training. As mentioned in section 8.3.2, Sha'ul was quoting Greek poets while speaking to philosophers at the Areopagus in Athens. Sha'ul accurately quoted the Hellenized poets Epimenides and Aratus. For in him we live and move and have our being, and for we are also his offspring. Sha'ul's mastery of Greek rhetoric. His letters utilize advanced Greco-Roman rhetorical techniques, such as diatribe, a rhetorical style involving an imaginary opponent. Diatribe explanation. The author poses hypothetical objections and then uses sharp rhetorical questions and delivers blunt, emphatic dismissals to advance their argument. This is high-level Greek and Roman philosophical training. Various other rhetorical techniques that Sha'ul used will be mentioned again in another section. Key point, Sha'ul was taught by Gamaliel, Hillel the Elder's grandson. Sha'ul exceeded other students with extensive training since a young boy, growing up at the feet of Gamaliel in preparation for becoming a religious leader himself. Tarsus was a place for the elite. Sha'ul's father must have been highly prestigious and a rich man to be able to have Gamaliel the Nazi personally teach Sha'ul, and to be able to afford living expenses in Tarsus as well as support his abundant travels. The topic of Sha'ul's father will be brought up again and expanded it in another section. Pay attention here. The Hillel dynasty preserved Babylonian intellectual influence. Hillel's Babylonian background meant that he brought diaspora interpretive traditions. Sha'ul was proficient in these practices among multiples of others that were taught in the schools of thought and philosophy, the Hellenized schools, making him an eloquent speaker with elite debating techniques and profound knowledge of the Torah, both written and oral, as well as epistemology, ethics, theology, and metaphysics. The Babylonian connection. Ethnic, descendant from Babylonian Yahudim, scholarly, trained in diaspora interpretive methods, and cultural. Later Babylonian influence. Centuries later, the Babylonian Talmud becomes the dominant Yahudi legal corpus. It simply shows that Babylon remained a major Yahudi intellectual center. Sha'ul's background places him inside diaspora Yahudi intellectual culture. Modern scholarship emphasizes that Sha'ul's thinking is deeply shaped by diaspora Judaism, not just Yerushalayim Pharisaic tradition. Evidence from scholarship. Sha'ul's thought is rooted in the cultural world of diaspora Judaism, especially its interpretive traditions and Septuagint-based reasoning. His interpretive methods overlap with midrashic and rabbinic strategies, showing he was trained in the same intellectual world that produced early halakhic reasoning. What this means. Sha'ul was not a provincial Pharisee. He was a highly educated diaspora Yahudi, fluent in Greek, Septuagint interpretive norms, diaspora hermeneutics, Yahudi rhetorical traditions, and Pharisaic halakhic reasoning. This matches exactly with the features listed regarding Babylonian intellectual teachings. Did Sha'ul have exposure to Babylonian-style legal reasoning? Number 1. Diaspora Judaism, including Tarsus, was heavily influenced by Babylonian Yahudi traditions. Babylon remained a major center of Yahudi scholarship after the exile. Diaspora interpretive culture, including allegory, legal creativity, and pragmatic rulings, flowed from Babylonian Yahudi communities. Number 2. Hillel the Elder, whose school shaped Gamaliel, was himself from Babylon. Hillel's halakhic style, lenient, pragmatic, universal ethics, was rooted in Babylonian Yahudi legal culture. Number 3. Sha'ul was trained at the feet of Gamaliel. This places him inside the Hillel tradition, which itself was shaped by Babylonian interpretive norms. This means Sha'ul's training indirectly inherits Babylonian diaspora legal creativity, flexible halakhic reasoning, ethical maxim-driven interpretation, pragmatic solutions to legal problems, and the plausible type thinking from Hillel the Elder. This is not fringe. It is the mainstream scholarly view that Sha'ul's hermeneutics reflect Yahudi diaspora intellectual patterns. What this means is, Sha'ul was trained in textual authority, rabbinic interpretive logic, argumentation through debate, legal reasoning to solve textual problems, practical application of law, ethical maxim-based reasoning. Like, an example, love fulfills the Torah. This matches halakhic features listed. Did Sha'ul inherit Hillel's flexible, ethical, and universalizing style? Yes, it's visible in his letters. Hillel's style, the whole Torah is fulfilled in one word. Love. Lenient rulings, ethical maxims, universal moral principles, diaspora influence, pragmatic rulings. Sha'ul's style. The whole Torah is fulfilled in one word, which is love. His style is legal flexibility for Gentiles. His style is ethical universalism, which is cited from Romans 2 and Romans 13. Also pragmatic rulings for communities. This is exactly the Hillel, Gamaliel, and Sha'ul intellectual lineage. Sha'ul's persecution of Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha Mashiach. Sha'ul's character and intentions cannot be understood without recognizing his actions and motivations. Historical information regarding Sha'ul's destruction of followers of Yahusha. In Masa 26:11, Sha'ul's own words describes him as punishing them often in all the synagogues, trying to force them to blaspheme, being exceedingly enraged against them, and pursuing them to even foreign cities. Sha'ul approved of the martyrdom of Stephen, and watched over the coats of the Sadducees and Pharisees who stoned him to death after the Sanhedrin Council rushed at him altogether. Stephen was the first martyr, and after his death, Sha'ul became the primary enforcer. Martyrdom started with the Yahudi Pharisees and Sadducees of the Sanhedrin, but later Rome continued what they started. Masa 22, Sha'ul persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering both men and women with authorization from the Sanhedrin. Sha'ul's political connections to the high priesthood. 1. Evidence in Sha'ul's written accounts. How high Sha'ul's access really was. In Masa, chapter 9, chapter 22, and 26 shows that Sha'ul Sha'ul went directly to the high priest of the Sanhedrin to obtain letters. He received authorization from the Sanhedrin to bind and deliver men and women, and he operated not just in Jerusalem but even to foreign cities like Damascus. That means he wasn't a random zealot or regular Pharisee. Either Sha'ul had an authoritative position, or his father did, or both. This means also that he was trusted by the priestly leadership of the Sadducees. The Sadducees were a very wealthy aristocracy and hereditary priests from the tribe of Levi, who managed the Jerusalem temple and the sacrificial rituals. The Romans relied on this elite group to keep the peace and govern local Yahudi affairs. Sha'ul functioned as an official agent of the temple establishment, empowered to act beyond Yehuda or Judea. In Second Temple terms, that places him inside the orbit of the ruling class, not on the margins. That was no small position for Sha'ul to have been placed as a young Pharisee. Again, his father must have held an esteemed position among the Sanhedrin, being that his father and grandfathers were Pharisees. Number 2. The high priesthood at the time was Sadducean, aristocratic, and political. The Sadducees controlled the temple, the Sanhedrin's political leadership, and they had a direct relationship with Rome. Pharisees like Sha'ul were a separate party, but often collaborated when interest aligned, especially against perceived sectarian threats like the 12 emissaries, other followers of the Way, including the Gentile assembly, and Yahusha Mashiach himself. So when Sha'ul receives letters from the high priest, it implies cross-party cooperation, the Sadducean high priest plus a Pharisaic zealot. This is highly important. Pay attention here. The Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha Mashiach were seen as dangerous to the Sadducean, Pharisaic, religio-political power structure. I mean, they were the lawgivers and the political heads of the Yahudi people. What's more is Rome sought to unite a socio-politically dysfunctional empire. Therefore, the Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha Mashiach were seen as problematic to the Roman Empire as well, but not quite dangerous yet. Rome expected that the Sanhedrin were going to take care of the internal affairs. Sha'ul was politically reliable enough to be entrusted with that task, to stop them at all costs. Number 3. Why Sha'ul was chosen. Status, trust. Given what has already been documented, a Pharisee, son of Pharisees, from a wealthy Roman citizen family in Tarsus, trained under Gamaliel, embedded in the Hellenized Hillel-Gamaliel network, put together, this all means Sha'ul belonged to a high-status Pharisaic family. Sha'ul had elite education and legal rhetorical skill, fanatically zealous against the Way. From the high priest's perspective, Sha'ul was the perfect weapon to stop the Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha Mashiach. Theological zeal plus social status plus rhetorical ability plus mobility, someone who could argue in synagogues, intimidate, coerce, manipulate, threaten, and organize suppression. Number 4. The Sanhedrin dimension, national level authority. When Massa says he had authorization from the Sanhedrin, that implies his mandate was national, not local. He could walk into diaspora synagogues and in effect he could say, I'm here with the authority of the leadership in Jerusalem. This shows a coordinated trans-regional persecution network. Sha'ul wasn't just a persecutor. He was a node in an institutional system, plugged directly into the high priesthood, aka the Sadducean aristocracy, the Sanhedrin, the National Council, and the Pharisaic intellectual class through the Gamaliel Hillel line. Number 5. Why Rome tolerated this? Because Judaism was a legal religion. Internal discipline of sectarian groups was considered an intra-Yahudi affair. As was already presented, Yahudi authorities, like Sha'ul, had freedom to suppress the followers of Yahusha Mashiach. So Rome didn't need to authorize Sha'ul. The high priest did, and Rome let that stand. How persecution worked in real Yahudi synagogues. Synagogue discipline. Synagogues had legal authority to administer floggings up to 39 lashes. This is cited from the Mishnah in Makot 3.1 through 15. Massa 26:11 confirms Sha'ul had used these mechanisms. Compulsion to blaspheme. Sha'ul forced believers to deny Yahusha. This was much more intense than one would think. This matches known Yahudi legal practice where refusal to deny a claim could be treated as blasphemy. The alternative to blaspheming was likely death. Number 1. If the accused didn't blaspheme Yahusha, they were considered a blasphemer of Yahuwah. Blaspheming was a capital crime in the Mishnah and Talmudic system of the Yahudi court, and decapitation is one of the 4 prescribed methods of execution alongside burning and strangulation, though the Torah itself prescribed stoning for the blasphemer. You see, there were things that were added by the Pharisees, because the Pharisees were the scribes, and the Pharisees, the scribe class, were the ones who actually translated the Septuagint from Abri. secular historical sources supporting the environment of persecution. While secular historians do not mention Sha'ul by name, they confirm the environment in which his actions occurred. Number 1. Pliny the Younger, a Roman governor, notes that followers of Yahusha were required to curse Yahusha to avoid punishment. This mirrors Sha'ul's attempts to force believers to blaspheme. This demonstrates continuity between synagogue persecution and later Roman persecution. Number 2. Roman legal status of Judaism. Again, Judaism was a legal religion. Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha HaMashiach were seen as a dangerous sect within Judaism. Yahudi authorities like Sha'ul had freedom to suppress them. This explains why Sha'ul could act aggressively without Roman interference. Here's the conclusion. Sha'ul's persecution is historically credible, supported by his own testimony, Luke's narrative, Yahudi legal practice, Roman historical records, and socio-political context of 30 to 40 CE. And Judea. Sha'ul's political connections to the high priesthood. Summary. Sha'ul was not a freelance zealot but an officially empowered agent of the temple establishment. Massa records that he obtained letters directly from the high priest and authorization from the Sanhedrin to arrest followers of the way in Damascus and other foreign cities, demonstrating national-level trust and cross-regional jurisdiction. In the Second Temple context, this means a Pharisaic intellectual trained under Gamaliel and from a wealthy Roman citizen family was deliberately chosen and empowered by the Sanhedrin, high priestly aristocracy, to suppress the followers of Yahusha Mashiach, who were Torah-obedient followers. Torah-obedient. His persecution activity thus reflects coordinated institutional action, not isolated fanaticism. From textual sources, Sha'ul violently persecuted followers of Yahusha HaMashiach. He used the public synagogue courts to punish, flog, and coerce. He traveled with extradition letters to arrest the followers of Yahusha Mashiach in foreign cities. He admits to being enraged and violent. From historical context, Yahudi authorities had legal autonomy to discipline sectarian groups in Rome and beyond. The early followers of Yahusha Mashiach who were Torah obedient were seen as a disruptive sect that was dangerous to the power structure of the religious leaders. This is highly important information here. Roman historians confirm Torah-obedient followers of Yahusha Mashiach had conflict with people who were not keeping the Torah but were claiming resurrection of Yahusha HaMashiach. That is the end of section 8.3.3 to section 8.3.5. Stay tuned for section 8.3.6. It'll be coming shortly. Shalom.